As stated on the other side, I was being cleared for the job of battalion intelligence officer. Fortunately, they didn't give me an IQ test. It wasn't my IQ that got me this job. It was the last one, I guess, to be filled. Very possibly before being given this assignment, I was a second lieutenant in the field artillery and qualified to be a forward observer. And because we were so close to the DMZ, there was a bunker up on the top of a hill, mountain, where we could see the DMZ. And I think there were 3 or 4 of us that, one officer and 2 or 3 enlisted men that lived there had the capability of heating up a stove, cooking some meals. Most of it was sea rations out of cans, some that we ate cold, some that we were able to warm. But our job was to observe anything and everything in the DMZ, and had to radio back to our battalion what we saw, and we were there as an alert if the North Koreans decided to come south again. It was a real joy to get back to base and take a shower and shave because we were up there for, recollection is, a week or 2 at the most, periodically, and there were a team of others. So maybe there were 2 or 3 teams that went up there prior to my getting this intelligence job. Back at home base, each one of the tents with officers in them had a available. They couldn't live on the base, but lived close by. Were young boys, probably in their teens, who we hired and paid a minimum amount of money. They did the laundry, cleaned up the tent, because we lived in tents that had a wooden floor, and probably 6 or 8 bunks, and a little, location for toiletries and letter writing capabilities. Both Mom and I wrote an awful lot of letters to each other. I've got a note over on the desk here that says, go up in the attic and see if you can find either the letters that I wrote to Mom or the ones that Mom wrote to me, because I think, God bless her, like so many other things that she saved, I think they're up there, and as soon as it gets a little cooler, I'll go up there and rummage around, see if I can find them. They might be of some interest if you wanted to read them. Most of the communications were how much I missed Mom and how much, she would tell me the progress that Donald was making in his growth in that first year. I think it was while the family was up at Sunset that I think Dad and Doug wouldn't buy a car from anybody else except a man, Damon Motors, up in Silver Creek. And I think he had can't remember the year, early 50s was our first car, and so Mom made arrangements to buy that so she'd have her own set of wheels. Most of the money that I earned, which was about $400 per month, most of it was sent home to Mom to use as she saw fit. I had very little need for money over there. An interesting aside, when we took the train from Busan north to the unit that I was assigned to in Korea, we were again advised that there were people at the train stations that would hawk and sell liquor. And whether it was true or not, I don't know, but we were told that the liquor was probably denatured alcohol, and anybody that bought it took the chance of going blind. Well, that was enough of a scare for me. Maybe some did go blind from buying and drinking denatured alcohol that probably had some coloring in it to make it look like real whiskey. So goes the life of a second lieutenant in the military in Korea. We would, there'd be periodic parades, there'd be periodic dignitaries that came, and at which time we had to whitewash everything, all the rocks and everything in sight to make it look presentable. There was one incident where my commanding officer, a captain, we would take the ton trucks that pulled the 105 millimeter howitzers, and we'd leave base camp and we'd go to a certain location and then fire the guns. On one occasion, this captain, who had a meeting before we left, I was in charge of one group, and he should have been thrown out of the service, is what he should have been. We had a meeting beforehand, and he was giving us the same code words on the radio that the whole battalion had, and he probably should have kept his mouth shut, but he was ahead of us in the Jeep, and up with the commanding officer and all the battery commanders, and I was with the troops coming up with the guns, and he got on the phone and gave some code word. Well, I had written all the code words down of what we were to expect and what a different code word meant. Get ready to disembark. Get ready to do this. What? So anyhow, he gave a command over the radio. I looked at my driver in the Jeep and said, "Did you hear what I heard?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, I've got it written down here, and here's exactly what it means. That we're getting ready to pull into a location." Well, all he wanted to do was hear his voice on the radio and play Big Shot, so that when he told us on the radio that we're getting ready to pull off and just deploy the guns, he gave the wrong message. And we were coming up over a mountain, and that's where I heard the voice at the top of the mountain. When we got down to the bottom, I thought, geez, there was some place that I missed that we should have pulled off. So I had the 2.5-ton trucks do a circle and come right back up over the mountain. Well, what he did was make a mistake in his command. We're passing trucks, the ones behind us that are coming down the mountain. We're going up. Well, we finally figured out what had happened. We turned around on the other side of the mountain, turned around, came back, and finally found where the rest of the battalion was. Well, this guy I think he'd been in the Army for a long, long time, and I think he had achieved the rank of captain. He probably, as I said, should have been thrown out, and probably was soon thereafter. But he really got a chewing from the commanding officer. Not to belabor the time in Korea and the stories, but there are a couple. One story is that as a forward observer, every 6 months, each unit is required to go through a procedure, a shoot, where you pack up all your equipment, you go to a certain location where there's a firing range, and perform. This is back in a time when I was in real good shape, And the forward observers, the guns were implanted, down in a valley, and the forward observers were sent up forward, and we had to climb a mountain, and I mean a mountain. And I was able to climb this mountain and perch along with other people on different mountains that had different targets, and we were on the radio, and there was a designated target, which was, I think, the top ridge of another mountain across the way. And without boring you with how it's done and everything like that, we were to fire, and when you shoot in the artillery, you pick out a target, you look on the map, you pick the coordinates, and you send the information back to the guns, and you have a gun shoot one round. And then you adjust the fire by having it move in yards, 100, 1,000, or somewhere in between, left or right, forward or back, and then you zero in on the target when one of the shots comes as close as you can, and you adjust a little bit more by saying down 50 or left 50 or right 50 or 100 or whatever it might be, fire for effect. At which time the 6 guns, which comprise a battery in the battalion, there's three gun batteries, a headquarters battery and a service battery. There's 5 batteries in a battalion. 3 of them are guns. And when you say fire for effect, the 6 guns, in addition to the one who you were adjusting, all fire. Well, I saw the most beautiful array of shells hitting that entire top ridge, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, I was very proud of myself. And before this all occurred, the commanding officer said, whoever does the best on this shootout will get assigned to be aerial observer. Well, we're earning $400 a month. The aerial observer gets another $125, so that's a 25-30% increase in pay, which ain't bad. So I would, if I achieved that, I'd get another $125, so it would be $525 per month. Ironically, there was another man from Bowling Green who had gone through ROTC. He and I both did exceptionally well. We're both given the designation of air observer, for which once a month we had to spend an hour or 2 in the plane to earn our pay. And we flew around these L-19s, which are small Piper Cubs, that in the time of war, you've probably seen it in the movies where somebody flies over an area and coordinates from a map and gets the guns to shoot at that point. Well, this was a real plus, and I enjoyed the notoriety and the extra pay. In Korea, we did not have dollars as we know dollars. It was, all the dollars were paid to you in what they called script, and it was almost like monopoly type money. And there was obviously black market activities going on. That's why they didn't have the dollars, but they had script. They had, periodically, they would have a changeover. You got to turn in the old script and get new. This was to prevent the black market from flourishing. Anybody who had accumulated a lot of script that shouldn't have had it had a heck of a time probably converting that to the new script that was issued. Once we were out in the field, quite a distance, and I had accumulated some script and had it back in my back at the base camp, and we were quite, as I say, quite a distance. I commandeered a Jeep and drove in the middle of the night, getting back to get my script and then get back to redeem it. The incoming phone call wasn't part of the script. Let's see, another problem that was involved with script, as you may not want to hear, there were USO shows that came around to the various units, and how in the world these young ladies, because some of them were very pretty and we hadn't seen a white woman in a long, long time, and they would come and they'd sing and they'd dance and whatever have you, but unfortunately, or whatever, some of these girls performed other acts for some of the guys who were starved for sexual activity. What didn't happen, I was starved for it, but I didn't participate. And how much it cost, I don't have any idea because I didn't inquire. But I do know that they accumulated a lot of script, and I'm sure they had some way to fence it or convert it or change it or what have you. But that did occur. Most of the meals that I had were not in the mess hall, but were in the officers' club. And let me tell you that an officers' club is a nice place to be able to go. The military takes care of its own, and I know that the mess halls were adequately staffed and the food was reasonable, but the officers did eat a little bit better. And we had a Latino, might have been Mexican, sergeant, and he could cook the greatest Spanish omelet that I have ever had. And ever since the early 50s, now for 50 years, on occasions when I feel like it, I'll order a Spanish omelet, and I at various restaurants, and I can never come close to how this man excelled at what he did. I'd have to check the dates to be sure, but at some point, the 63rd Field Artillery Battalion of the 24th Infantry Division was going to get transferred from Korea back to Japan. We had to clean up the camp, store and transport all of our material down. I think we went down either by truck or by train back down to Busan and then across the way to Sasebo, Japan. At some point along the way, while in Korea, everything in the military is done by your date of rank. In other words, I became a second lieutenant on a certain date in 1953, and so in 1954, after 18 months, so it probably was in the fall of 54, I was promoted to first lieutenant. Well, since I was the senior first lieutenant, what they needed was a battery commander for headquarters battery. And so when we had as we did, an early morning meeting at 7 or 7:30 with the old man, with the commander, he made the announcement that we need a new commander for the headquarters battery, and Coon, you're it. And I said, oh shit. So I was torn because it was just an accident. I happened to be the senior officer, so I got the job. It was good experience, but I could have done without it. So anyhow, we packed up all our stuff, went to Japan, nicer location. If you've ever seen barracks in a military institution, they're like you know, you've probably seen them in movies. At least we had beds and sheets and meals and all the good things of life. It also allowed me to go into the town of Sasebo, do some shopping. There were things that I bought for Mom and Dad and for Betty Jane and Donald. One being a train set that I subsequently gave away. Other things like kimonos and some of the items that I have around here, pieces of ivory carved in the shape of a fisherman. It allowed me some degree of civility to have a nice location. We often would go into town. There were buses that left camp and went into town, and we'd go in and we'd go to some bar, and there were Japanese girls that were there as hostesses. They were not hostesses, they were prostitutes. There were most of the men and or officers would go into town. They'd sit there and have a few drinks, and some hostess would sidle up to you, and you'd dance and have conversation, as limited as it might be, and they were in hopes that you would stay overnight at their apartment or residence. I would imagine after a while, my face or my whatever got to be well known, because I would always leave the bar with one or two other men and take the bus back to camp. Others stayed and paid their whatever fee and had their activities and caught a bus back in the morning prior to reveille, at which time they had to show up. But I never did. I was very, very faithful to the lady that I loved. Aren't you guys getting a little tired of listening to all this palaver? Hopefully you can fast forward. But I wouldn't want to do over again what I did in the military, but I wouldn't not want to have done it either, because it gave me a great deal of satisfaction, gave me a great deal of confidence to be the leader of 100 and some odd men, and it was at a time when nobody was shooting at me, so that had a plus. I do feel so sorry for the families and the folks that went to war, in whatever war, and didn't come home. God bless them, and God bless their family for the pain that they went through. I'm sure I suspect that, knowing that I was going to Korea, one of the reasons that Mom named you Donald III, was because I was going into whatever kind of danger she didn't know and I didn't know. But I suspect that that's one of the reasons that you got the moniker that you did. One aside to my being appointed as Air Observer was a sad occasion. When we went out and bivouacked and moved from one area to another, tents were put up and we'd be stationed there to do whatever needed to be done. Because when there's no war, it's constant training and or practicing your trade to make sure you knew what you were doing if and when it ever came. But as Air Observer, I was required to do something that was very, very unfortunate. One of the other batteries came to bivouac in an area where two rivers joined and went off and joined together and off the river went. Well, when they got there, it was a hot day, and the current battery commander of that battery, when asked if the members could go for a swim, and they did. Unfortunately, and you can't always anticipate these kind of problems, but where the two rivers joined, it must have created one hell of a ebb and flow and undertow, and two of the boys in this battalion, in this battery rather, went swimming among other ones, but unfortunately these two got caught in the undertow and got swept away. The battery commander was summarily punished, but they immediately called for a helicopter, and we followed the river and or various creeks off of the river, and finally came upon came upon one of the boys who had drowned. And what I had in the cabin was a rope with an improvised hook on it, that if we spotted a body, I could hopefully hook the body in some part, underarm, under leg, whatever, and pull them over to shore. We traveled quite a distance because the river was fairly swift, and finally was able to locate a body and pull them over. And being the coward that I am, or was, I didn't want to see the boy. That wouldn't have served any purpose at all. So I was able to pull him over. The helicopter landed, notified Graves registration as to where we were. They came and showed up. All I did was get out of the helicopter and walk upstream. I didn't particularly want to see any of the details of this poor lad's drowning. So sometimes with every plus there's a minus, and that was the minus that I experienced. Another sad experience was one of the, and I don't recall all the details right now, but one of the sergeants under my command made some grievous error, and I can't recall even now what it was. And one of the hardest things I had to do was to bust him from sergeant down to corporal. He didn't particularly agree with me, and that's understandable. But I thought in order to keep cohesiveness in the organization, and I couldn't just slap him on the wrist. This meant a reduction in his pay and a reduction in his status in the battery. But he's the one that did it, not me. Whatever it was that he did, and I can't recall, and it doesn't make any difference what it was. When you're in a situation like that, whether it be in Korea or in Japan, it doesn't take you long to grab a calendar, as maybe you guys have done, whether it's in high school or college or classes or whatever it might be. But I had a calendar and put an X through each day as it passed, and I knew the date that I was supposed to be released, which I believe was in March of 1955. And so the orders and everything in the Army moves slowly. The orders were cut. I was given notification thereof, and transportation was provided in some fashion to get me from Sasebo in the southern part of Japan up to Tokyo. Well, good friend Larry Ward, who went into the service the same time I did, he was sent to Fort Knox in Kentucky and then on to artillery school in Oklahoma. I went to Oklahoma and then went to a line outfit. But nevertheless, when I got to Tokyo, I met up with Larry Ward because they had a barracks, set for people who were leaving Japan and going back to the States. Now, even though when anybody joins the military, they're told, don't volunteer. Well, anyhow, Larry had been in Tokyo for some time. Well, now it's July of '07, and after reviewing all of the tapes in Florida and writing down the subjects, I found only one short segment that was blank, which is amazing. And rather than lengthen the explanation, I'll try to continue what I believe I said when recording this segment. After arriving in Tokyo, I was able to move into the transient BOQ, which is a bachelor officer's quarters. And since Larry and I had no official duties, we traveled around Tokyo, seeing like the Imperial Palace and then checking out the bars and having a few beers in the evening. At almost all the bars, the girls tried to connect, but as previously stated, we remained pure and true to our wives. I don't recall the length of time that we were billeted there, but when we agreed to travel by ship, we were both assigned positions aboard ship as part of our duties. We were assigned as prisoner officers. Some men who had been tried by military court-martial, and were being sent back to the States to serve their penalty, were housed in cells in the bow of the ship, the most uncomfortable part. And there were NCOs, non-commissioned officers, in charge of the prisoners, and we were to check in periodically to make sure there was no problems. Honestly, neither of us ventured below decks to see our charges. We sat on deck chairs like on a cruise, tanned, read books, had a few cocktails, and took quite a few naps. And I think this is about the end of the blank part, so I'll stop here and you can pick up wherever I left off before. Ship, with nothing much else to do except eat and read or sit in the sun out on the deck. My uniform didn't fit too well by the time I got off board. And I guess your experiences teach us things. Even though Mom wanted to go on a cruise ship at some point, by the time we got through paying for kids in college and had the time together to do some of these things and had the money to do it, by that time, whoops, I dropped the thing. By that time, Larry was through college, and about that time, 1985, is when Mom fell. So it presented a heck of a problem, and almost didn't rule it out completely, because people do get on board cruise ships in wheelchairs, but it didn't seem to make an awful lot of sense, and Mom and I agreed on that. I think I've already told the story of Aunt Evelyn living in Oakland, but hesitating because of past improprieties on my part. In her mind, I wasn't worthy of coming down and meeting the ship and saying hi. So we got to Oakland, California. All of this information that you're being fed might be, as I think about it, it might be one heck of a lot more than you want to know about what happened and along the way. And if you get tired of it, or you haven't got, you're not driving from here to Florida or California and can listen to all this palaver, just fast forward or pick up snippets of this, that, and the other thing, and go on from there. But you asked for it, Larry specifically, and Paul and Don agreed that I ought to do it, so I'm doing it, and if you're tired of it, just set it aside, and maybe when you reach my age, you can sit down and listen to the whole thing and get a few laughs. I hope there's some laughs in there, too. Well, here we are arriving in Oakland, and I think I already went through the story of Aunt Evelyn, as I mentioned. And anytime you have troops in the military moving from A to B, somebody has to be in charge. And so Ward and I boarded a train in Oakland. We were going to go down through L.A., as I think I mentioned, over to El Paso, across to Texas, to Camp Riley, I think it was, in Arkansas or somewhere down there. That's where these poor lads who hadn't seen a Caucasian woman and or seen a cold bottle of beer in the States anyhow, got into it, and I think I already related that story of how some of them didn't get back to the train in time, and so I'm sure maybe they're still in Leavenworth. I don't know what they did. Not have mentioned it before, but I think those plate glass windows on trains, as you walk down a hallway, are pretty darn thick. And I think a couple of these guys got so rambunctious. One of them went through the window. What his medical injuries were, I don't have any idea, but they broke the confounded window. I don't think I mentioned that before. Whenever we dropped the remaining soldiers, I then took a flight to Fort Dix, New Jersey, where I was to be separated, and took that flight from New Jersey home. It was tough sitting around in New Jersey. You're close enough, but far enough away so that you can't do anything about it. But finally got home to a joyous reunion with my lovely wife and one-year-old son. I think this was like April, either March or April of 55, because I had been away for just about a year. And after being away for about a year, it's funny, it takes you a while almost to reconnect. I'm sure Mom looked a little bit different, and I'm sure I did. I think I got home later on in the week, maybe a Thursday or Friday or something like that, and Mom and Dad had the weekend to take care of you, Donald. And so Mom and I took off for Toronto to just get caught up on everything and all the things that were happening and not happening, and so we left Parkhurst, and you can imagine the kind of state that I was in. There was a motel, if you can recall, between Belmont and Colvin on Sheridan Drive. Well, we both decided that it was going to be too long. I think this was in the evening. We waited until Donald went down to sleep, and then we took off, and there was just no way that the two of us were going to drive all the way to Toronto before we found a hotel room. So we stopped. We stopped like a Friday night in the motel, Colvin Manor or whatever it was, and then took off Saturday morning and went to Toronto and did a few things in Toronto. And I think Mom thought, and I thought, we'd probably stay the weekend and come back the early part of the week. Well, as happy as I was to see my wife, I had not spent any time with my oldest son either. So sometime on Sunday, we packed up and came back. I'm sure Mom was somewhat disappointed, and I had mixed emotions about the whole thing. We had pretty much kept in touch as to what was going on and through letters, and I was up in the attic of the garage, and I thought I knew where the letters, either Mom's or mine, were, and be darned if I can find them. I don't know how much, after listening to all these tapes, I don't know how much of those you might want to read of her telling me how Donald was growing and the things that he was doing and the things that I was missing, and I telling Mom things that I was doing over there, and so we kept pretty close, as to what was going on. I think I wrote every day, and I think she did too, and that was a joy, and made the stay a little bit easier, as opposed to some people who didn't get any mail or got it, once a week or once a month. So she was very, very faithful in writing and keeping me abreast and keeping my spirits up. $300, and probably my last month's pay of $400 or $500 and a quarter. I do think that every fraternity of any size has either college or fraternity have alumni associations, and it may have been, if we got home on Sunday, it may have been the following Monday when I knew that in Buffalo, because of the monthly magazines that we got as members, that the Buffalo Alumni Association of SAE met at the Buffalo Athletic Club, right off of McKinley Circle, every Monday at lunch. Either that very following Monday or the subsequent Monday, I was down. Sorry about this, guys. I think my batteries failed, and I didn't pay attention to the red light being on, so hopefully I won't completely repeat myself, but when I sat down there were probably 8 or 10 SAE alumni sitting at the table. I sat down between Arthur Beck, who was the general agent for National Life, and Dick Smith, who went to the University of Maine and worked for General Electric for quite some time as an engineer before he was convinced by Art and or didn't like what he was doing, and so he joined National Life before I did. Well, sitting between these two gentlemen, and I looking for work, and was asked a lot of questions like, where'd you grow up, and are you and your father or your family well known in the community? Yes, and the Board of Education and the Spencer Kellogg, and you went to Bowling Green? Yes, I did. And I was sitting there probably like with a bobblehead. My head was spinning because at first Dick would ask a question and Art would ask a question. And so I kept answering them, and yes, I majored in insurance and marketing, and had spent a year in Korea and 2 years in the service, and now was all through and was looking for a job. And after innumerable questions, and you got to remember that this man, Arthur Beck, was quite a salesman. So he suggested that after lunch maybe it might make sense for me to come up to the office. And so I did. We went up to the office, and his suggestion was, well, maybe you wouldn't even be qualified for the insurance business, but here's a test that you can take, so why don't you either do it here or take it home, and I can't recall what I did, but subsequently filled the forms out. And about this same time, a good friend of Dad's, Carl Matthews, who was the manager, and again, I hope I'm not repeating myself, because I don't know where I left off with this tape. I tried to rewind and find out where I was. Carl Matthews was the manager of the M&T at the corner of Chippewa and Delaware, and he handled all the accounts for National Gypsum, which was right up the road on Delaware, about halfway between Chippewa and Tupper. That's where their national headquarters was. And so he had, I think, arranged for me to go in and see the personnel director at National Gypsum, which I did, who, after we chatted for a while, offered me a job right on the spot, $400 a month. I guess I thought about it. I don't know as I went back to see him. Maybe I did, but my inclination was to get back to Art Beck and talk to him more. And as I said, Art Beck was a darn good salesman. He painted a pretty rosy picture of the kind of a job it would be, the kind of income that I could earn, how renewals worked, how persistency fees worked, and I got pretty well taken in with the whole thing. I was anxious to prove myself. I came home to my lovely wife and my mother and father and told them the decision that I had made and that I thought I would sign a contract. Subsequently, Mom, Betty Jane, having worked in an insurance office in Cleveland from the time or before we got married, had an opinion of insurance salesmen. And my dad had had a unfortunate experience with a New York life agent at some point where I think what he did was use his dividends and allowed Dad to buy another policy. So his first policy wasn't going to be paid up when he thought it would. So he thought, oh, geez, my son and my husband are going to be one of those guys, which wasn't too exciting for them.